Hello, it's Belinda. I'm back to share day 6 in my December daily album. Day 6 features this gorgeous cut file from Felicity Jane. It is an Advent cut file. It does have the full 25 days on the Advent calendar, but I have made some alterations to this to just have 6 slots, and I'm adding a little bit of journaling. Now, I am going to start by saying that this idea was completely scrap lifted from Sheree Forcier. I hope I pronounced that correctly, who is a fantastic Australian YouTuber, and she is on the design team for Felicity Jane. I saw her do something very, very similar, and I was completely inspired to adapt this to my own day 6 page, which is what I've done. So I started off by showing you that I'd run some stitching around the outside of this little house cut file, and I have gone ahead and added some red line tape to the inside of each of the 6 little pockets. Now, I have left, this is a slightly longer video because I've left a little bit of detail in here, just in case there is anybody who does have this cut file and was wanting perhaps a bit of a visual on how to put it together. Now, unfortunately, some of it is a little bit off camera because I was working closer to my body, but I hope I do get some of it back in frame for you. So I'm using my ruler to figure out where to put these little pockets. It's quite simple because I am having 2 rows of 3, so they center really easily. And what I found the easiest thing to do was to score all of the little pockets, fold them in first, and then add the adhesive. Now you'll see me fold them all down. Hopefully this stays in frame. Nope, not this time. But what I've done is I've removed the adhesive from the bottom flap first, and then I've used that to, there you go, you can see that there. I've stuck down the 2 side flaps to that adhesive, and then I've removed the backing from the adhesive on the side flaps, and that just allows the pocket to stay together while I am positioning it and pressing it down onto the background. So what I've got here for day 6 is just a little bit of journaling. My theme for the month of December was joy, and we had a pretty quiet December. My husband was home, which was fantastic, and I think he'd come home unexpectedly from work the day before. So he ended up having 3 weeks at home with us, which was amazing. And my journaling for day 6, I didn't really take a lot of photos throughout the month of December. So there are quite a few filler days, and this is a filler day, but it worked out really well. It's just some journaling about 6 little moments of simple joy that I experienced throughout the day. Joy was my word and my theme for the month of December. So I'm trying really hard to try and bring that into my album, and I was trying really hard to bring that into our lives throughout the month. So I've gone in Photoshop. What I did was, once I had cut everything out, so the cut file from Felicity, I know I'm jumping around a little bit here, I'm sorry. The cut file from Felicity Jane comes with all the little bits and pieces that you need. It comes with the house, it comes with the pocket, the little wreaths that go at the top, and the numbers 1 to 0, so that you can create your own numbered numbers to put on the front of each of the pockets. So once I had cut all of the little bits out using my silhouette, I measured the inside of one of the pockets, and I can't quite recall, because I sized everything down to fit my 6x8 page, I can't quite recall what the dimensions were. But once I'd measured it, I then created a little box in Photoshop that was the size of the inside of the pocket, and then I did my journaling inside there and printed it out onto just a regular piece of white cardstock and then trimmed them down. In the end, I do have to trim some of the little journaling inserts down a little bit more, because the way that I had scored and folded the pockets, some of them ended up just a little bit tighter fit. So I did have to go and trim down some of those little journaling spots to have them fit into the pockets nicely without too much of a struggle. So I did use my T-square ruler there because I wanted to make sure that they were all nice and straight and even. Again, this is something that was totally scrap lifted from Sheree. She used this gorgeous gold glitter vinyl to adhere the numbers to the front of the pockets, and then she also cut one of the little messy circle wreaths out of that for the embellishment at the top of the house. So I've gone and cut out the numbers 1 to 6. I did have some trouble getting them off the backing, so I had to put that number 1 to the side because when the vinyl came off, it pulled a piece of the backing as well. But then I figured out how to do it for the remainder of the numbers. So I'm just using my tweezers to pop that into the right place. It's quite flimsy, and the numbers are really tiny once they were cut to this size. So I did have to use my tweezers to get them placed. But I won't leave you watching me do this whole bit. It's pretty repetitive. But there we are. There's all the numbers adhered down. So I'm just showing you, I cut out one of the wreaths from the red patterned paper, or the plain coloured paper, which came in the Felicity Jane Noel kit. And then I'm just using some of my art glitter glue adhesive to apply around the inside of that wreath, and I'm going to pop it up the top there of the little house. I think that looks really cute. It's a really intricate cut file. Some of the pieces didn't cut out super well when it was cut that small, but you really can't see that. Now I'm trying to decide what letter stickers I'm going to use for my title, which I think is just going to be Simple Joys if I remember. And I grabbed these Ellie Studio puffy stickers, which I think I picked up last year. They're a red, but they're not too bright a red. They're sort of a slightly more muted red. So I end up using those. They don't quite match the color of the wreath, but that's okay. They're not so far away that it's going to be a problem. So Simple Joys was not my title. Joyful Moments was my title. And I've popped it onto this waxed paper. I just wanted to make sure that it was going to fit where I wanted it to fit. Then I have the gold messy circle wreath, which I'd cut out of the vinyl. The glitter vinyl. And I've stuck that down on top of the red wreath, and it just adds a nice little look. And I've got this wood veneer number 6, which came in the Ali Edwards kit, or came from Ali Edwards last year. And I'm not actually doing anything to this wood veneer. I'm not dressing it. I'm not doing anything with it. I'm just leaving it as is. And I'm going to stick that inside the wreath. It's a perfect fit. So I'm going to pop that inside for my day 6. And just using a stamp block to weigh that down while the adhesive is drying behind the wood veneer. Okay, so now I've got my title lined up on my little ruler, and I'm going to pop that down in between the wreath and the little pockets. I use this ruler. It's really, really handy. I think it's from We Are Memory Keepers, and it's really good for getting your letters spaced out nicely. It's a great tool. I love it. I've got all the different shape ones as well, but I always forget to use them. So again, picking up from Sheree, I used some of the excess gold glitter vinyl and adhered that to the back of each of the little journaling cards, just to give it a nice little finish when they're sitting inside the pocket. And I'm having to trim some of those down to make sure that they go in nicely. Now, one thing that I did do, I think a couple of days later, which is not on camera, and I didn't record this, but as I was showing my husband and showing my mum this page and pulling the little journaling spots out, I was noticing that pulling them in and out, they were a little bit flimsy because I didn't really use a heavyweight cardstock for the journaling. So what I did was at the top of each little journal spot, I had a really tiny little circle punch, and I punched a really tiny circle up the top, and then I've just popped a little bit of plain white twine through it. So it gives you something to hold on to as you're pulling the cards out of the pockets. Hopefully that will protect them and preserve them for just a little bit longer if someone is pulling them out over time. I just didn't want them to end up all raggedy and then not go back into the pockets. So you can see that I do have a little bit of trouble with some of those, and I have to trim them down. In hindsight, I probably should have tested them out for sizing before I went ahead and printed them, but that's okay. We learn from these things. Although I liked the look of the page as it was, I wanted to add a little bit of embellishments, a little bit of embellishing to it just to finish it off. So I've grabbed these two little containers of tiny wood veneer pieces from Felicity Jane. One is some tiny trees and the other is some tiny stars. And I'm just going to scatter a couple of those around the page. Not sure that I love this finishing touch, but I kind of didn't want to go and reach for more gold glitter, particularly because my gold glitter stars are not the same kind of glitter as the vinyl, so I didn't want it to clash. But I think it looks okay. The wood veneer works well with the number 6. So I've just scattered those in a couple of different places. I think I ended up with 3 trees and 3 stars. And then I stick them down using my art glitter glue once again with the fine tip. And I won't make you watch me do all of that. Okay, so now I'm moving on to the backing for the little house, and I'm using these designer dies from Carter Bella, which are some foliage dies, and I'm going to DIY my own little wreath. So I've started it off here. I've cut out some of the leaves from some white cardstock and some from that pink, plain pink paper that came in the Felicity Jane Noel kit. I've used the grey striped check. What would you call that? Not sure what you would call that pattern. The paper came from the Die Cuts with a View paper pad. So I went back into my Silhouette Studio software and cut out another version of the house. And then I've added a double row of stitching around the outside of that. And I went ahead and I was just checking to see if I had enough pieces of foliage, and it turned out that I didn't. So I went back to my Cuttlebug and I cut out a whole heap more of the foliage pieces. So I ended up only using 2 of the different designs. There's that double row of double stitching around it. I've also lightly sketched a circle by tracing around, I think it's a coaster that I had on my desk I used with a pencil just to guide me on where I needed to create the wreath. So I've cut, some of them are the single branches and some are the double branches. And like I said, I've used some white and some pink, and I'm just going around and I am adhering those down. I'm only using just a little bit of wet adhesive on the base of each of the little pieces of foliage. And that's to give it some lift and to allow me to continue to slide more pieces underneath as I go around. And I'm trying to not really think too hard about what pieces I'm putting down where. I'm alternating between the single and the double, and I'm alternating between the white and the pink. And I know the lighting's not super great on this video. I have been relying on natural light that comes in from the window. And as you know, when you rely on natural light, it can change really, really quickly. And I obviously didn't realize that the light had gotten a lot brighter and hadn't adjusted my camera settings accordingly. So I apologize, it is a bit of a funny lighting situation here. So I'm just going to go around and I'm going to lay all of these pieces down, tucking them underneath each other and making them into the wreath shape. And I don't make you watch me go and do this whole thing. I've just left enough in so that you can get an idea of how I've gone about getting all the pieces down into the wreath shape. And then I'll skip forward to the next step in just a few moments. Okay, so I've got all the pieces adhered down into the wreath, and as I said, I only popped the adhesive onto the bottom, the very bottom of each of the little pieces of foliage. So the rest of it is quite loose, and I didn't want it to get caught or snagged on anything in the album. So what I'm doing now is I'm going back in with my wet adhesive, and I'm just adding some extra adhesive onto the top parts of not all of the pieces of foliage, just some of them, and then pressing them down just so that I've still got the dimension, but nothing's really flapping around, so nothing's going to get caught and snagged and tear off inside. So now that that wreath is finished, I can move on to the rest of this little filler page. This little Christmas tree die cut was from the Coco and Reno December die kit. I have a little subscription to their dies. I love them. They're such good value, even for me with the Australian dollar and the shipping rates. It's still really good value because you get so many dies. And these December ones were gorgeous. These little Christmas trees with the little heart cutouts, absolutely gorgeous. So I've cut that Christmas tree out from the same red and pink, or red one side, pink the other side paper that came in the Felicity Jane kit, and I'm just using my wet adhesive on the back of that to go around, and I'm going to stick the little Christmas tree to the inside of that wreath. And I use my ruler to line it up. I'm not sure what quite happened actually. Now that I'm looking at it, I think I know exactly what happened, but something is a little bit off center in the end, and I figure that out when I go to add the finishing embellishment, which is some twine down the middle of the page, but it's okay. I managed to make it work. So I've grabbed some of these gold puffy letter stickers, which were from, I'm not sure which Felicity Jane kit they came from, and I'm just writing out the word joy. And I'm adding a little bit of wet glue to the back of those because I'm not super confident that the adhesive on those is going to hold outside of a page protector. So I just want to give them a little bit of extra stick. And it's the word joy, as I said, which is my theme and which fits in with the journaling that I have on the back side of this. Now, if you watched my previous video where I talked about flipping the orientation of a page and getting things the wrong way around, I did it again here. So this was supposed to be on the back of my page, and the little house with the Advent type house, that was supposed to be on the front of the page. But when I off camera, and I'm really annoyed at myself because I wanted to keep in my process for adding in the acetate pop-in piece to get it to sit in my album. I thought I had that footage, but then I lost it. So you don't see me do that on camera, but you will see it in the close-up videos, close-up photos, I think. So I added some little red sequins around the inside of the wreath and at the top of the Christmas tree. And then I've got this leftover red and white twine bow that I had made for, I think for a 12 by 12 project page that I was doing, and I didn't end up using it. And I decided that I'm going to add it to the top of the little house cutout just because it looked like something was missing. But popping the bow just up there, floating around on its own, it just wasn't really working. So I'm off camera now having a bit of a think, a little bit of a brainstorm about what I'm going to do with it. And what I end up doing is grabbing out my roll of red and white twine after I've had a drink of my tea, and I'm going to run the twine from the top of the page down to the wreath, and then I'm going to use the bow at the top of the wreath as though it's tied on. So it's when I go, I'm playing around with different trims here just to see if I wanted to try something different, but I end up just sticking with the twine. And it's when I go to put the twine down the center that I realize that something's not quite lined up, and I'm not sure what it is. I think maybe it's just because the stripes, the vertical stripes, are a little bit off center, but anyway, it looks fine. It's not obviously out of alignment. So I'm just going to run that wet glue down and then adhere the twine straight down to that, and then stick the bow above the wreath. And that will be it to finish off this insert. I do have my close-up photos coming at the end where you can see what I have done to punch some holes to adhere this into my album without punching into the actual page itself. And to do that, I just used some clear acetate and folded it over, adhered it to, sandwiched in between the front and the back piece, and then punched the holes in it. So you can see that in the close-up videos. If you'd like more information on how I did that, please leave me a comment and I'd be more than happy to just send you a little bit more info. And I'm sorry that I lost that footage. But that is it. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this, and have a great day. you.